The sound of gunfire cracked through the air like thunder, spooking the horses and sending the stagecoach lurching violently to one side as Delia Blackwell clutched her leather satchel to her chest, her knuckles white with fear. This journey to Colorado had been meant to be her fresh start, not her final moments on this unforgiving earth. The year was 1878, and the promise of a new life teaching at a schoolhouse in Bonanza, Colorado, had drawn Delia away from her comfortable yet stifling life in Boston. At 24, she'd grown weary of her parents' attempts to marry her off to suitable gentlemen with fortunes, but no warmth in their eyes. She craved independence, adventure, and the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of children who had few educational opportunities in the untamed Western territories. "Everybody out. Hands where I can see 'em," a gruff voice commanded as the stagecoach finally skidded to a stop, dust billowing around them. The driver had already been shot, his body slumped over the reins. Inside the coach, Mrs. Henderson, a widow traveling to live with her son, whimpered beside Delia while across from them, a portly banker named Mr. Simmons fumbled for the wallet in his breast pocket, his face ashen with terror. "Please," Delia whispered. "Perhaps if we give them what they want." The door was wrenched open before she could finish, and 3 men wearing bandanas over their faces trained their revolvers on the passengers. "Valuables? Now," the tallest one barked, his eyes cold beneath the shadow of his hat. Mr. Simmons handed over his wallet with trembling hands. Mrs. Henderson reluctantly removed her wedding ring, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. When it came to Delia's turn, she hesitated, clutching her satchel tighter. "Miss, I won't ask again," the bandit warned, cocking his pistol. "Everything I own is in here," Delia said, her voice surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. "My clothes, my teaching credentials, my life savings, perfect," the man said, grabbing for the satchel. In a moment of defiance that would later seem foolish, Delia pulled back. "No." "Please." What happened next unfolded with terrible swiftness. The bandit yanked the satchel from her grasp, and when Delia lunged forward instinctively to retrieve it, the butt of his pistol connected with her temple. Stars exploded behind her eyes as she crumpled back against the seat. Through swimming vision, she saw Mrs. Henderson scream as the men dragged them from the coach. "Check his pockets," one of the bandits ordered, gesturing to the dead driver. Delia felt herself being pushed to her knees on the dusty ground. Mr. Simmons was begging for mercy, his voice high and strained. Mrs. Henderson had gone silent with shock. "We can't leave witnesses," another voice said coldly. "No," Delia cried, but her protest was cut short by the deafening sound of gunfire. Something hot and searing tore through her side, and she toppled backward, striking her head on a rock as she fell. Blackness closed in around the edges of her vision as pain radiated through her body. The last thing she heard before consciousness slipped away was the sound of retreating hoofbeats and cruel laughter fading into the distance. Time became meaningless in the haze of pain and semi-consciousness that followed. Delia drifted in and out, aware sometimes of the heat of the sun beating down on her face, other times of the cool touch of evening air on her skin. She couldn't move, could barely breathe without agony lancing through her side. The smell of blood, her own blood, mingled with dust and sage in a sickening perfume. She thought of her parents back in Boston, who had begged her not to go west. "It's uncivilized, dangerous," her father had warned. She dismissed his concerns as the overwrought worries of an aging man who'd never ventured beyond the Mississippi. Now, as she lay dying on the hard ground of the Colorado Territory, miles from anywhere, she realized with bitter irony that he'd been right. Delia's thoughts grew more disjointed as dehydration and blood loss took their toll. She imagined she heard hoofbeats again, though these were slower, more measured. A hallucination, she decided, born of desperate hope. No one traveled this lonely stretch of road often. It was why the bandits had chosen it for their ambush. But the hoofbeats didn't fade. Instead, they grew louder until they stopped altogether, replaced by the soft crunch of boots on gravel. "Dear God," a man's voice murmured, sounding distant to Delia's failing senses. She felt a shadow fall across her face, blocking the punishing sun. With tremendous effort, she forced her eyes open, squinting at the silhouette looming above her. A man's face slowly came into focus, weathered by sun and wind, framed by dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his duster, with eyes the color of a summer storm. "Miss." The stranger knelt beside her, his voice gentle but urgent. "Can you hear me?" Delia tried to speak, but her parched lips and throat produced only a raspy whisper. The man leaned closer. "Water," she managed. His movements were swift and efficient as he uncorked a canteen and carefully lifted her head, allowing a few precious drops to wet her lips and tongue. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. "I'm going to help you," he said, his gaze taking in the bloodstains on her dress, the ugly wound at her side. "You've been shot, but you're still breathing, and that's a good start." Delia wanted to laugh at his understatement, but the pain was too great. Instead, she asked, "The others?" A shadow crossed his face. "I'm sorry," was all he said, and it was enough. With surprising gentleness for hands so calloused and strong, the stranger examined her wound, his frown deepening. "Bullet went clean through. That's lucky. Still, you've lost a lot of blood, and I'm betting there's infection setting in." He looked around at the desolate landscape, seemingly making calculations in his mind. "Nearest town is Bonanza, but it's a half-day's ride, and you won't make it that far without proper care first." Delia felt consciousness slipping away again. The stranger must have noticed because his voice became more insistent. "Stay with me, miss." "What's your name?" "Delia," she whispered. "Delia Blackwell." "I'm Nathan Lawson," he replied. "And I'm going to keep you alive, Miss Blackwell." "That's a promise." It was the last thing she heard before darkness claimed her once more. When Delia next opened her eyes, she was indoors. The ceiling above her was rough-hewn timber, and the air smelled of wood smoke, coffee, and something medicinal. She lay on a narrow bed beneath soft, if threadbare, blankets. The pain in her side had dulled to a persistent throb rather than the sharp agony she remembered. She turned her head slowly and saw him, Nathan Lawson, seated in a chair nearby, cleaning a rifle with practiced movements. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with the lean, muscular build of a man who lived by his wits and strength in a harsh land. His features were striking rather than conventionally handsome. A strong jaw dusted with stubble, a straight nose that had clearly been broken at least once, and those remarkable eyes that seemed to shift between gray and blue, depending on the light. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, surprise and then relief washing over his face. "You're awake," he said, setting aside the rifle. "Was starting to worry you might never come back." "Where am I?" Delia asked, her voice still weak. "My cabin," Nathan replied, moving to pour water from a pitcher into a tin cup. "It's not much, but it's shelter. We're about 10 miles east of Bonanza." He helped her sit up slightly so she could drink, supporting her back with a strong arm. The simple movement sent fresh pain radiating from her wound, and she gasped. "Easy," he cautioned. "That bullet did a fair bit of damage. You're lucky to be alive." "The others weren't lucky," Delia said, memories of the attack flooding back with horrible clarity. Nathan's expression darkened. "No, they weren't. I buried them proper before bringing you here, said words over them, though I'm no preacher." A lump formed in Delia's throat. "Thank you for that kindness." He nodded once, seemingly uncomfortable with gratitude. "How long have I been here?" she asked, taking in her changed clothes, a man's shirt far too large for her frame and the bandages visible beneath it. 3 days, he answered. "Fever took hold the first night. Wasn't sure you'd make it through, but you're stronger than you look." Delia's hand went to her side, feeling the carefully wrapped bandages. "You tended my wound." A faint flush colored his cheeks. "Did what I could. Cleaned it with whiskey and packed it with yarrow paste. Mrs. Callahan from town helped with." He gestured vaguely at her changed clothes, clearly uncomfortable. "She's a widow who lives a few miles south. Good woman. Knows her healing herbs better than any doctor." "I'm in your debt, Mr. Lawson," Delia said softly. He shook his head. "Nathan," he corrected, "and there's no debt. Couldn't very well leave you there to die." "Many would have," she countered. Something like anger flashed in his eyes. "Then many aren't worth the air they breathe." He stood abruptly. "You should rest more. I'll fix some broth. You need to get your strength back." As he moved about the small cabin, Delia took the opportunity to observe her surroundings more carefully. It was a simple one-room structure. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while a small table with 2 chairs sat beneath a window that looked out on pine trees and mountains beyond. A trunk, presumably containing Nathan's belongings, rested at the foot of the narrow bed where she lay. Shelves held practical items, ammunition, tools, jars of preserved foods. It was Spartan but neat, the dwelling of a man who valued functionality over comfort. "How did you find me?" she asked as he returned with a steaming mug. Nathan helped her sit up more fully, arranging pillows behind her back. "Was tracking a mountain lion that's been taking calves from ranches near town. Saw buzzards circling and went to investigate." His jaw tightened. "Found what was left of the stagecoach. The horses were gone, probably stolen by the gang. The driver and passengers were, well, dead," Delia finished for him, accepting the mug with slightly trembling hands. "Yes, except you. Barely breathing but alive." He sat back in his chair, watching her carefully. "You remember anything about the men who did this?" Delia sipped the broth, grateful for its warmth and flavor after days of unconsciousness. "They wore bandanas over their faces, 3 men. The leader was tall with cold eyes. Another had a scar across his hand. I saw it when he grabbed Mrs. Henderson's ring. The third was younger, nervous." Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds like the Clayton gang. They've been terrorizing stagecoaches and homesteads between here and Denver for months. Sheriff can't catch them." "Will you tell the sheriff about what happened?" "Already did. Rode into town yesterday while you were sleeping to let him know. He's sending telegrams to notify the families of the deceased." He paused. "Is there someone I should send word to for you? Family waiting in Bonanza, perhaps?" Delia shook her head. "No one in Bonanza. My family's in Boston. I was coming west to teach at the schoolhouse in town." "The teaching position," Nathan said with recognition. "Town's been waiting on a new school teacher since Miss Porter left to get married last spring." He studied her with newfound interest. "You're a long way from Boston." "I wanted something different," Delia admitted. "Something meaningful." A hint of a smile touched his lips. Getting shot by outlaws probably wasn't part of that plan. Despite everything, Delia found herself smiling back. "No, that particular adventure wasn't in my itinerary." Their eyes held for a moment before Nathan cleared his throat and stood. "You should finish that broth and rest some more. Doctor says you shouldn't be moved to town for at least another week, so I guess you're stuck with me till then." "Doctor? You brought a doctor here." Doc Wilson came out the first day to make sure you'd survive. He's getting on in years, so the trip was hard on him. That's why he suggested Mrs. Callahan help with your ongoing care." Nathan moved toward the door. "I need to check my traps." "Will you be all right alone for a bit?" Delia nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of her situation alone in a remote cabin with a stranger, dependent on his care and kindness. Yet something about Nathan Lawson's steady gaze and straightforward manner inspired trust rather than fear. "Thank you," she said again, unable to find words adequate to express her gratitude. He simply nodded before stepping outside, leaving Delia to contemplate the strange turn her life had taken. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Nathan would rise before dawn, stoke the fire and prepare a simple breakfast. He would help Delia eat, check her wound, and then head out to hunt or check his traps. During these hours alone, Delia's strength gradually returned. She progressed from sitting up in bed to taking tentative steps around the cabin, holding onto furniture for support. Mrs. Callahan visited every other day, bringing fresh bandages, healing salves, and welcome female conversation. She was a robust woman in her 60s with capable hands and kind eyes who treated Delia's injury with brisk efficiency. "That Nathan's a good man," Mrs. Callahan remarked one afternoon as she changed Delia's bandages. "Keeps to himself mostly. Lost his wife and baby girl to fever 5 years back. Never been the same since." Delia's heart constricted at this revelation. He never mentioned that, would he? Not one to speak of his pain. The older woman applied a fresh poultice to the healing wound. "Been bouncing between jobs since then. Trapping, hunting, sometimes ranch work. Sheriff deputizes him when there's trouble. He seems very capable," Delia observed. Mrs. Callahan gave her a knowing look. "That he is. Handsome, too, if a girl's looking." Delia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I wasn't, course not, dear," the widow said with a wink. "Now, let's get you back into bed before he returns and thinks I've been working you too hard." In the evenings, Nathan would return with game or fish, and they would share a simple meal by lamplight. At first, conversation was halting and awkward, but gradually they began to learn about each other. Nathan, she discovered, had grown up in Missouri, the son of a blacksmith. He'd come west after the war, drawn by the promise of open spaces and freedom from memories of battles he'd fought in as a young soldier. He'd met his wife, Clara, in Denver, and they'd settled outside Bonanza with dreams of building a horse ranch. "What happened after you lost them?" Delia asked one evening, cautiously broaching the subject Mrs. Callahan had mentioned. Nathan's hand stilled on the coffee cup he held. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. "I went a little mad for a while," he finally said, his voice low. "Drank too much, picked fights. Did my best to get myself killed without actually putting a gun to my head." He stared into the fire. "Sheriff Daniels locked me up one night after I nearly beat a man to death in a saloon. When I sobered up, he offered me a choice: leave town or make myself useful." "So you chose to be useful," Delia observed softly. Nathan nodded. "Started tracking for him. Turns out I had a knack for finding people and animals that don't want to be found. Slowly built a life again, though it's a shadow of what I'd planned." In turn, Delia told him about her sheltered upbringing in Boston, her father's shipping business, her mother's social ambitions, and her own determination to forge a different path. "Teaching felt like something meaningful," she explained. "And the West seemed like a place where a woman might define herself by her own actions rather than her family connections or marital prospects." "It can be," Nathan agreed. "But it's also harsh and unforgiving. People die out here from simple mistakes." "Or from deliberate cruelty," Delia added, thinking of the Stagecoach attack. A muscle twitched in Nathan's jaw. "The Clayton gang will face justice eventually. Men like that always do." "Is that what you believe? That justice always prevails?" He considered her question seriously. "No," he admitted. "But I believe in trying to make it so anyway. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it?" As the days passed, Delia found herself watching Nathan when he wasn't aware of the careful precision of his movements, the rare smile that transformed his serious face, the gentleness in his hands that belied their strength. She told herself it was merely gratitude and the natural intimacy that develops between patient and caretaker, but in quiet moments, she knew it was more. A week after she'd first awakened in Nathan's cabin, Delia was strong enough to venture outside. Leaning on Nathan's arm, she stepped into the crisp mountain air and gasped at the vista before her. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by pines, with snow-capped mountains rising majestically in the distance. A stream burbled nearby, and wildflowers dotted the grassy meadow that stretched toward the tree line. "It's beautiful," she breathed, filling her lungs with the scent of pine and earth. "It's why I stay," Nathan said simply. "Even after everything, I couldn't leave this." They walked slowly to a fallen log near the stream, where Delia sat gratefully, still weak from her injury and confinement. "Doc Wilson's coming tomorrow," Nathan said, skipping a stone across the water's surface. "He'll likely say you're well enough to move to town soon." "Oh." Delia was surprised by the pang of disappointment she felt. "Yes, I suppose I should find lodgings in Bonanza, see if the teaching position is still available. It is. Mayor Thompson confirmed it when I was in town 3 days ago." Nathan continued to stare at the water. "They've arranged a room for you at Mrs. Harding's boarding house. It's respectable, mostly unmarried teachers and shop girls. That's very kind of them." Delia watched his profile, trying to read his thoughts. "And you? Will you go back to your trapping and tracking?" He nodded. "Life goes on." An awkward silence fell between them, filled only by the sound of the stream and birdsong. Delia felt a strange tension in the air, as if something important hung in the balance, but neither of them knew how to grasp it. "I don't know how to thank you," she finally said. "You saved my life." Nathan turned to face her, those stormy eyes intense. "You don't need to thank me, Delia. Anyone would have done the same. We both know that's not true." His gaze dropped to her lips for a fleeting moment before he stood abruptly. "We should head back. You shouldn't overexert yourself." Delia allowed him to help her up, acutely aware of his hand at her elbow, the subtle scent of leather and pine that seemed to cling to him. As they walked back to the cabin, she wondered if she'd imagined that moment of tension between them, or if Nathan felt it too but was determined to ignore it. The following day, Dr. Wilson pronounced Delia well enough to travel to town. "The wound's healing nicely," the elderly physician said, packing away his instruments. "Still needs careful attention, mind you. No strenuous activity for at least another month, and you'll have a scar, I'm afraid." "A small price for my life," Delia replied. "Indeed. You're a fortunate young lady. Not many survive encounters with the Clayton gang." He glanced at Nathan, who stood near the fireplace. "Lawson here is quite the hero." Nathan looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Just happened to be in the right place. MMM." The doctor's eyes moved between them knowingly. "Well, I've arranged for Tom Jenkins to bring his wagon tomorrow morning. He'll take you to Bonanza and Mrs. Harding's boarding house." After the doctor left, a strained silence filled the cabin. Nathan busied himself preparing dinner, while Delia packed her meager belongings, the few items that had survived the robbery, along with a dress Mrs. Callahan had altered for her. "I'll miss your cooking," Delia said lightly, trying to break the tension. Nathan glanced up from the rabbit stew he was stirring. "Mrs. Harding sets a fine table from what I hear. Will you visit town sometime?" The question slipped out before Delia could reconsider it, his hand stilled. "Do you want me to?" "Yes," she answered honestly. "I would like that very much." Nathan studied her face as if searching for something. Whatever he saw made him nod slowly. "Then I will." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Tom Jenkins arrived with his wagon as promised, greeting Delia with friendly curiosity and Nathan with obvious respect. "Town's mighty excited to finally meet the new teacher," Tom said as he helped load Delia's small bundle of possessions. "After what you've been through, you'll be quite the celebrity." "I'd prefer a quieter welcome," Delia admitted. "Folks mean well," Nathan told her, his hand lightly touching her elbow. "But if anyone bothers you with too many questions, Sheriff Daniels will set them straight." The moment of departure came too quickly. Nathan helped Delia climb onto the wagon seat, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Take care of yourself, Miss Blackwell." The formality stung after the intimacy of their days together. Delia wanted to say something more, something meaningful, but Tom Jenkins was already clicking to the horses, and the wagon lurched forward. Looking back over her shoulder, Delia watched Nathan's figure grow smaller as the wagon trundled down the rough track toward Bonanza. Only when he was completely out of sight did she turn to face forward, toward her new life, the one she'd planned, yet now felt somehow incomplete. Bonanza was exactly the sort of frontier town Delia had imagined during her journey west. A main street lined with wooden buildings, some quite substantial, others more hastily constructed. The mountains provided a dramatic backdrop to the bustling settlement, where horses, wagons, and pedestrians moved with purpose. Tom Jenkins provided a running commentary as they rolled into town. "That there's the Silverton Hotel, fanciest place in Bonanza. Next to it is the assayer's office. Miners bring their ore samples there to see if they've struck it rich." He pointed to other establishments, the general store, the telegraph office, the sheriff's office, and finally, a whitewashed building near the church. "That's your schoolhouse. 26 pupils last count, ages 5 to 16. Delia felt a flutter of excitement despite her lingering melancholy at leaving Nathan's cabin. This was what she had come for, a chance to make a difference, to build something meaningful. Mrs. Harding's boarding house was a tidy 2-story structure with a wide porch and curtained windows. The landlady herself emerged as the wagon pulled up, a thin, precise woman with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a severe bun. "Miss Blackwell, I presume," she said, her keen eyes taking in Delia's appearance. "We'd begun to worry you weren't coming. She had a bit of trouble on the road, Mrs. Harding," Tom explained, helping Delia down. "Yes, so I've heard. Dreadful business." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "Well, you're safe now, dear. I run a respectable house with sensible rules. No gentlemen callers in private rooms, dinner at 6 sharp, and the door locks at 10. "I trust that suits you." "Perfectly," Delia assured her, though the rules seemed unnecessary for a woman of 24 who had just survived being shot and left for dead. Her room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small desk, and a window overlooking the street. After Tom Jenkins departed and Mrs. Harding left her to settle in, Delia sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the strangeness of her situation. A knock at the door roused her from her thoughts. A young woman with bright red hair and a smattering of freckles peeked in, her smile friendly. "Hello, I'm Harriet Walsh, but everyone calls me Hattie. I teach music lessons and play the organ at church. Mrs. Harding said you're the new school teacher." Delia nodded, grateful for the friendly face. "Delia Blackwell. Yes, I've come from Boston to take the position. And had quite the adventure getting here from what I hear," Hattie said, her eyes wide. "Is it true Nathan Lawson found you half dead and nursed you back to health in his cabin?" News traveled quickly in small towns, Delia reflected. "Yes, though Dr. Wilson and Mrs. Callahan helped considerably." "How romantic," Hattie sighed, then blushed at Delia's surprised expression. I didn't mean it's just Nathan Lawson is so, and you're so. Well, people will talk is all. There's nothing to talk about, Delia said firmly, though she felt heat rise to her cheeks. Mr. Lawson saved my life. I owe him my gratitude, nothing more. Hattie looked unconvinced but tactfully changed the subject. The school board is meeting tomorrow evening to officially welcome you. And Sunday after church, the ladies' auxiliary is hosting a reception so everyone can meet you properly. The whirlwind of social engagement seemed overwhelming after the peaceful solitude of Nathan's cabin, but Delia summoned a smile. That sounds lovely. The next few days passed in a blur of introductions and preparations. Mayor Thompson and the school board formally welcomed her and showed her the schoolhouse. The building was simple but sturdy, with rows of desks facing a blackboard and teacher's desk at the front. Shelves held a modest collection of books and maps hung on the walls. Term starts in 2 weeks, the mayor informed her. Gives you time to settle in and prepare your lessons. The parents she met seemed genuinely pleased to have a qualified teacher from the East. The children, glimpsed playing in the streets or accompanying their parents to the general store, regarded her with shy curiosity. Throughout it all, Delia kept finding herself looking for a tall figure in a duster, hoping to glimpse Nathan in town. But days passed, and he didn't appear. He rarely comes to town except for supplies or if the sheriff needs him, Hattie explained when she caught Delia scanning the street outside the general store. Nathan prefers his solitude. I wasn't looking for Mr. Lawson, Delia protested, too quickly. Hattie's knowing smile said she wasn't fooled. The ladies' auxiliary is abuzz about your time alone with him in that cabin. Mrs. Preston is particularly scandalized, says your reputation might be compromised. Delia stiffened. I was unconscious most of the time and recovering from a gunshot wound the rest. There was nothing improper. I know that, Hattie assured her. And most folks are just grateful he saved you. But small towns run on gossip, and you and Nathan make quite the story. The Sunday reception at the church was well attended, with seemingly every resident of Bonanza eager to meet the new teacher who had survived such a dramatic ordeal. Delia answered the same questions repeatedly. Yes, the bandits had killed the other passengers. No, she hadn't seen their faces clearly. Yes, she was recovering well, thank you. She was enjoying a brief moment of respite near the refreshment table when a hush fell over the crowd. Turning, Delia saw Nathan entering the church hall, looking distinctly uncomfortable in clean clothes that somehow seemed too formal for his rugged frame. Their eyes met across the room and Delia felt her heart quicken. Mr. Lawson, Mayor Thompson boomed. What a pleasant surprise. Come to check on your patient, have you? Nathan nodded, making his way through the crowd that parted before him. He stopped in front of Delia, removing his hat. Miss Blackwell, you're looking well. Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Delia was acutely aware of the curious stares directed their way. I'm feeling much stronger. Good. That's good. He shifted awkwardly. Town treating you all right. Everyone has been very welcoming. An awkward silence fell between them until Mrs. Preston, a matron with a perpetually pinched expression, approached with determined steps. Mr. Lawson, how good of you to join us, she said, her tone suggesting the opposite. I was just telling the ladies how fortunate Miss Blackwell was that you found her. Of course, in normal circumstances, a single gentleman housing an unmarried lady would be quite inappropriate, but given the emergency. Nathan's jaw tightened. Nothing inappropriate happened, Mrs. Preston. Of course not, the woman said with a tight smile. Though one can never be too careful about appearances, especially for a schoolteacher who must set an example for impressionable young minds. Delia felt a flash of anger. Mr. Lawson saved my life at considerable inconvenience to himself. I believe that sets an excellent example of Christian charity and courage." Mrs. Preston's nostrils flared. "Well, I'm sure you know best, being from the East with your modern ideas." She moved away with an offended air. "Sorry about that," Nathan muttered. "Should have known my presence would only make things worse for you." "Nonsense," Delia said firmly. "I won't let small-minded gossip diminish what you did for me." Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. "You're tougher than you look, Boston." The nickname spoken with a hint of affection warmed her. "I survived being shot and left for dead. A few wagging tongues won't defeat me." The barest smile touched his lips. "No, I don't suppose they will." Before they could continue, Sheriff Daniels approached, a gray-haired man with shrewd eyes and a weathered face. "Lawson, good timing. I was hoping to find you today." Nathan straightened, instantly alert. "What is it?" "Got word the Clayton gang hit another stagecoach yesterday near Black Canyon. 3 dead, including a child." The sheriff's voice was grim. "Army's sending a detachment, but I could use your tracking skills. They can't have gotten far." Delia felt her blood run cold at the mention of the gang that had nearly killed her. Nathan's expression hardened. All trace of his earlier smile vanished. "When do we leave?" "First light tomorrow. Meeting at my office." Sheriff Daniels nodded to Delia. "Miss Blackwell, pleasure to meet you properly. Sorry about the circumstances." After the sheriff moved away, Delia turned to Nathan, concern evident in her face. "Be careful. These men are killers." "I know what they are." His voice was flat, controlled. "That's why they need to be stopped." "Is this because of what happened to me?" she asked quietly. Nathan held her gaze. "Partly. They've hurt too many people, left too many bodies." He hesitated, then added, "I'll come see you when I get back, let you know what happened." It wasn't much, but it was a promise of seeing him again, and Delia clung to it. "I'll hold you to that, Mr. Lawson." "Nathan," he corrected, the ghost of a smile returning. "After everything, I think we're past formalities, don't you?" "Nathan," she agreed, liking the feel of his name on her lips. 2 weeks passed with no word from Nathan or the posse that had gone after the Clayton gang. Delia threw herself into preparing for the start of school, organizing lessons, and learning her students' names and backgrounds. The work was absorbing and satisfying, yet she couldn't help watching the road leading into town, hoping for a glimpse of a familiar rider. School began, and Delia discovered she truly loved teaching. Her students were eager to learn, from the smallest children just mastering their letters to the older boys and girls hungry for knowledge that might help them build better lives. Even the most reluctant scholars were won over by her genuine interest in their progress and her innovative teaching methods, so different from the strict rote learning they'd experienced before. Yet each evening as she walked back to the boarding house, Delia found herself wondering where Nathan was, if he was safe, if he thought of her at all. "You've got it bad," Hattie observed one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch, enjoying the cool air after a warm day. "I don't know what you mean," Delia demurred. "You look at that road like you're expecting someone to ride out of the sunset," her friend said gently. "It's been nearly 3 weeks. The posse returned 4 days ago." Delia's head snapped up. "What? Why didn't you tell me? I thought you knew." "Sheriff Daniels and the others rode in Monday afternoon. You were teaching." "And Nathan?" Delia asked, her heart in her throat. Hattie's expression grew concerned. "He wasn't with them. I assumed he'd gone back to his cabin." Fear clutched at Delia's chest. "Something's wrong." "He would have come to town. He promised." The next morning, Delia rose before dawn and walked to the sheriff's office, determined to get answers. Sheriff Daniels was already at his desk, looking tired and careworn. "Miss Blackwell," he greeted her, surprised. "What can I do for you this early hour?" I'm looking for Nathan Lawson, she said directly. I heard the posse returned days ago, but he wasn't with you. The sheriff's expression grew grave. No, he wasn't. We tracked the Clayton gang to their hideout in the mountains. There was a gunfight. We captured 2 of them, but the leader, Jed Clayton, escaped with Lawson in pursuit. And you just left him. Delia couldn't keep the accusation from her voice. We had wounded men and prisoners to bring back, Sheriff Daniels said defensively. Lawson insisted he could track Clayton alone. Said he'd bring him in. That was 4 days ago, Delia pointed out. Aren't you concerned? The sheriff sighed. Of course I am. Nathan's a friend. But he's also the best tracker in these parts and can take care of himself. If anyone can bring in Clayton, it's him. And if Clayton got the better of him? If he's lying wounded somewhere? The possibilities made Delia's blood run cold. I've got responsibilities here, Miss Blackwell. I can't leave town unprotected to search for one man who knew the risks. Delia straightened, a plan already forming in her mind. Then I'll go. That's out of the question, the sheriff said firmly. You're just recovered from one brush with death, and you've got students counting on you. Today's Friday. I have the weekend, and I know where his cabin is. I can start there. Miss Blackwell, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, Delia interrupted. Nathan saved my life. I won't abandon him if he needs help. Sheriff Daniels studied her determined expression and sighed again. You're not going to let this go, are you? No, sir, I am not. Fine. But you're not going alone. I'll ask Tom Jenkins to drive you out to Lawson's cabin. If he's not there, you come straight back to town. No heroics. Deal, Delia agreed, knowing it was the best compromise she'd get. 2 hours later, after arranging for Hattie to inform the school board of her brief absence, Delia was in Tom Jenkins' wagon heading for Nathan's cabin. The journey seemed longer than she remembered, but finally, the small clearing came into view, and with it, a thin wisp of smoke rising from the chimney. Someone's home, Tom observed as he helped Delia down from the wagon. Hope surged through her as she approached the cabin door. She knocked firmly, then stepped back, heart pounding. The door swung open to reveal Nathan, his face unshaven, a bandage visible beneath his partially unbuttoned shirt. He stared at her in disbelief. Delia, what are you doing here? You promised to come see me, she said, drinking in the sight of him alive, if somewhat worse for wear. When you didn't, I feared the worst. Behind her, Tom Jenkins cleared his throat. I'll just wait by the wagon, Miss Blackwell. Take your time. Nathan's eyes never left Delia's face as he stepped aside to let her enter. The cabin looked much as she remembered it, except for the bloodied shirt soaking in a basin near the fireplace. You're hurt, she said, moving closer to examine the bandage visible through his open shirt. It's nothing serious. Knife wound. Clayton, Nathan nodded grimly. We fought. He got me with his hunting knife before I could subdue him. Did you? Delia couldn't finish the question. Kill him? No, he's in the territorial prison in Denver awaiting trial along with his men. Nathan's expression was unreadable. Justice will be served. Relief washed over Delia. Why didn't you come to town? Let people know you were all right. Needed time to heal, to think. His eyes searched her face. Didn't expect you to come looking for me. I was worried, she admitted. You promised to tell me what happened. And I would have, once this healed enough to ride. He gestured to his side. Didn't want to worry you. Well, that plan failed spectacularly, Delia said with a hint of exasperation. I've been imagining you dead in a ditch somewhere. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Sorry to disappoint. Don't joke, she said seriously. I was terrified something had happened to you. Something in her tone made his expression soften. Why do you care so much, Delia? I'm just the man who happened to find you. You know it's more than that. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken emotions. Nathan took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "What is it, then?" he asked quietly. Delia summoned her courage. "I think about you, all the time. When I'm teaching, when I'm walking through town, when I'm lying awake at night. I think about your kindness, your strength, the way you saved me without expecting anything in return." Nathan's gaze intensified. "Delia, let me finish," she insisted. "I know it might seem foolish. We barely know each other. But sometimes life gives you a second chance for a reason, and I believe meeting you was mine." For a long moment, Nathan was silent, and Delia feared she'd misread everything, made a terrible mistake. Then he reached out, his calloused hand cupping her cheek with infinite gentleness. "I've thought about you too," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Tried to tell myself it was just concern for your recovery, but it's more than that." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Much more." Delia leaned into his touch. "Then why stay away? Because you deserve better than a broken man with nothing to offer but a cabin in the woods and a past full of ghosts." "Shouldn't I be the judge of what I deserve?" Delia challenged. "I think I deserve a man of honor and courage. A man who would risk his life to bring murderers to justice. A man who would save a stranger and expect nothing in return." Nathan's resolve visibly wavered. "The town already gossips about you because of me. A schoolteacher needs a spotless reputation." "The town will always find something to gossip about," Delia said dismissively. "I care more about finding happiness than pleasing Mrs. Preston and her sewing circle." A reluctant smile curved Nathan's lips. "You really are the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "Thank you," Delia said primly. "Now, are you going to kiss me, or shall I return to town disappointed?" For a heartbeat, Nathan looked stunned. Then he laughed, a rich, genuine sound that transformed his face, making him look younger and unburdened. "Well, when you put it that way." He leaned down, his lips meeting hers with surprising tenderness. Delia's arms wound around his neck as she returned the kiss, feeling a sense of rightness, of coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unevenly, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably speak to Tom Jenkins," he murmured. "Tell him you'll be staying for tea at least." "That would be proper," Delia agreed, though propriety was the furthest thing from her mind at that moment. "And then I should probably ride into town tomorrow, speak to the sheriff. Maybe call on you properly at the boarding house. Mrs. Harding would appreciate that. She's very particular about her rules. I imagine she is." Nathan brushed a strand of hair from Delia's face. "This won't be easy, you know. People will talk." "Let them," Delia said with newfound confidence. "We've both survived worse." The months that followed proved her right. There was gossip. Of course, raised eyebrows when Nathan began calling regularly at the boarding house. Whispers when he escorted Delia to church on Sundays. Outright speculation when he started building an addition to his cabin that spring. But there was support, too. Sheriff Daniels heartily approved of the match. Mrs. Callahan took to bringing pies to Delia's classroom and offering motherly advice. Even Hattie declared it the most romantic thing she'd ever witnessed and defended the couple vigorously against any criticism. Most importantly, Delia's students adored her, and their parents came to respect her dedication and teaching skills too much to let gossip interfere. When Nathan proposed that summer, presenting her with a simple gold band and his heart, not even Mrs. Preston could find fault with their proper church wedding, or the respectable reception that followed. They were married on a bright August day in 1879, exactly 1 year after Nathan had found Delia barely breathing beside the wrecked stagecoach. As she spoke her vows, Delia reflected on how close she had come to losing her life before it had truly begun, and how tragedy had ultimately led her to the greatest happiness she'd ever known. Their life together, was not without challenges. Nathan's nightmares sometimes woke them both memories of war, of losing his first family, of the gunfight with the Clayton gang. Delia had her own scars, both physical and emotional, from the attack that had nearly claimed her life. But they faced these demons together, finding strength in each other's love and understanding. The school board initially balked at the idea of a married teacher continuing her work, but Delia stood firm. With Nathan's unwavering support and her own proven success in the classroom, she negotiated a compromise. She would teach until they started a family, and even then might continue part-time if a suitable arrangement could be made. Nathan expanded his cabin into a proper home, adding rooms and comforts while preserving the simplicity they both appreciated. He took a more stable position as the sheriff's deputy, though he still occasionally tracked dangerous fugitives when his skills were needed. His experience and steady temperament made him respected throughout the territory, and there was talk of him running for sheriff himself someday. In the spring of 1880, they received word that Jed Clayton and his gang had been convicted of multiple murders and robberies. The leader was sentenced to hang, while his accomplices faced long prison terms. Delia and Nathan attended the execution in Denver not out of vengeance, but to witness justice finally served for all the lives the outlaws had destroyed. As they rode back to Bonanza afterward, Nathan reached across to take Delia's hand. "Are you all right?" he asked, knowing the trial had brought back difficult memories. Delia nodded, looking out at the same mountain passes where she'd nearly lost her life. "I'm at peace with it now. Everything that happened led me here to this life with you. I can't regret any of it." Nathan squeezed her hand. "I used to think finding happiness again was impossible, that I didn't deserve it after losing Clara and the baby." His voice grew soft. "You proved me wrong, Boston." "I'm glad I did," she replied, her free hand resting on the slight swell of her abdomen, their first child, due in the autumn. Years passed and their family grew. A son, William, arrived in September 1880, followed by twin girls, Elizabeth and Sarah, in 1882. Delia eventually returned to teaching part-time, sharing the position with Hattie, who had married the new doctor in town. Nathan was elected sheriff after Daniels retired, bringing a fair but firm hand to maintaining order in the growing community. Their home became known for its warmth and hospitality. Children from town often stopped by for extra tutoring from Mrs. Lawson, or to hear the sheriff's carefully edited tales of frontier adventures. Holidays saw their table filled with friends who had become family misses. Callahan, Tom Jenkins and his wife, Hattie and her husband, and others who had supported them from the beginning. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Nathan took Delia riding to a special spot in the mountains, where wildflowers carpeted a meadow and a clear stream bubbled over rocks. "I found this place the day before I found you," he told her as they sat together watching the sunset paint the peaks in gold and crimson. "I remember thinking it was too beautiful to exist in a world that sometimes seemed so cruel." Delia leaned against his shoulder, comfortable in the silence they'd learned to share. "And now I know beauty and goodness can exist alongside hardship," he said thoughtfully. "That sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to the best. Like being left for dead after a stagecoach robbery," Delia teased gently. "Like finding a stubborn Boston schoolteacher barely breathing and refusing to give up," Nathan countered, drawing her closer. As dusk settled over the mountains, Delia reflected on the strange and winding path that had brought her west. The journey had nearly killed her, yet had ultimately given her everything she'd ever truly wanted: purpose, love, family, and a home where she belonged completely. "I love you, Nathan Lawson," she said simply. "And I love you, Delia Lawson," he replied, his voice sure and steady as the mountains surrounding them, "till my last breath and beyond." In the gathering twilight, with the first stars appearing overhead, they held each other close, two souls who had found each other against all odds in the vastness of the American West, creating a love story neither could have imagined but both would forever cherish.